Hello, everyone. I'm Ms. Gian, and for today, we will be talking about one of the most interesting constructs of studies as social psych, which is conformity and obedience. So, we will cover the following topics: defining social influence, kaning mga major studies or pinaka-influential and famous studies sa group influence, ang psychology behind conformity, and ang good and dark side of conformity. So, with that being said, let's begin. So, I have a food for thought for all of you. I want you to think about the last time na you changed your behavior because of what others around you were doing. So maybe in a theater or in a example na mo sa gymnasium and na ay ni present. Then you started clapping when everyone else did, even though you weren't sure nga no. Or maybe ni follow mo sa direction sa crowd during an emergency. And when somebody looked up, ni tanapod mo sa taas. So, usa man din yung gibuhat. What did you just do? Did you simply obey the crowd? Did you comply with an order? Or ni conform na mo? Before ta mo officially begin, I want you to look at this video depicting how the power of conformity is invisible but very powerful.
To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
Have a seat, and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much. I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's going on in their brains is Jonah Berger of the University of Pennsylvania.
This sort of internalized form of herd behavior is part of what we call social learning. Starting at a very early age, when we see members of our group perform a task, our brains literally reward us for following in their footsteps.
When I saw everybody stand up, I felt like I needed to join them. Otherwise, I'm excluded. Once I decided to go with it, then I felt much more comfortable.
Conformity is how we become socialized, but it can also cause us to develop bad habits or repeat past wrongs.
And it's why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think right now.
So after watching the video, we kind of have a grasp now of what we will talk about today. So we're going to explore one of psychology's most fascinating and sometimes disturbing topic, and that is how and why we conform to social pressure. We'll look at 3 groundbreaking studies that reveal just how powerful social influence can be, and what this means for all of us. And by the end, you'll understand not just what conformity is, but when it helps us, when it can lead us astray. So let's start with a clear definition first, before anything else, because it's very important. Okay, I know in the English dictionary, they're kind of interchange. Pero in social psych, they're distinct concepts. So we will look at the difference sa terms ni conformity, compliance, obedience, and acceptance. So conformity is changing your behavior or beliefs to match others. Ang key test ani is whether you'd act the same way even if ikaw ra usa. Okay? Well, on compliance, you're going along publicly without really believing it. So you're really just trying to get along with everyone else. And then obedience is following an explicit command from authority figures. Acceptance happens when you genuinely change your mind and internalize what the group believes. So recall the video that I showed you a while ago. Which part man dito ang girl where ang girl was just complying and which part there is a video where the girl is already conforming. And I'll leave that question for you to ponder on. So, all of these processes of influence are in a continuum. So, there's an external pressure. Then, this external pressure makes us want to publicly comply to that behavior or action. And because we did something that our bodies did something, then we tend to privately accept what we just did. I'll explain the mechanisms why we tend to accept or internalize the things that we did, and eventually have an internalized belief. Later on, it will be explored more. So anyway, conformity isn't inherently good or bad. Ang good side niya, it enables social coordination, but again, it can also lead to harmful outcomes. So we are covering this concept because it is important to understand when and why it occurs so that we don't blindly follow something without first questioning it. Kay igana ba gyud no ang characteristics sa Pinoy, no, himuong santos sa mga politiko, right? Grabe kay ka loyal, mas loyal pa sila sa politician kaysa sa ilahang own family and their own wives or husbands. Ang akong goal by the end of this lecture class no is for all of us to be confident in asking one simple question. It's just one word, 3 letters, but it's very powerful. Ask why. Remember class na ang person that does not think for themselves can easily be controlled and manipulated and will spread that form of social learning into a group. And if you look at it from outside the box, it can be very dangerous way of behaving, especially if what you're following is a bad norm. And we'll cover what is a bad norm and a good norm in the last few slides. But again, I want to reiterate that it's important, Jud, now we think critically and not just blindly follow someone because an authority figure says so. And there's a goal that I wanna inculcate in everyone. So anyway, in the next few slides, we will look at psychology experiments on group influence, starting first with Sherif's autokinetic studies. So atong first famous groundbreaking study is gikan ni Muzaffar Sherif in the 1930s. So for you to really understand what this study is, I want you to imagine that you're in a room na very dark. You can't see anything but a circle na light that's far away from you. And if you look at the light, it appears to move, right? It appears to move here, right and left. Pero what's happening really, why the light seems to move, is an optical illusion that we all have. It's called the autokinetic effect. Kaning autokinetic effect happens when so you're placed in a room and then there's a small light that's far away from you and it will appear to move, even though it's not moving. Here comes the study. You're in the room, right? And then the researcher asks you to estimate how far it moved alone. How far it moved. So naay 2 instances ani. Naay 2 groups. One was where they were asked alone and the other where they were asked together as a group. So when they were asked alone, ilahang answers, it varied widely. Some say na, I'm just simplifying it ha, pero some would say, for example, na, well, I guess the light moved like an inch from the left. And another person would say, I guess it's 3 inches going up or something. And maybe another person would say like, well, I see the light moving like maybe 10 inches to the right or something, some sort of like that. No, it's very varied lang answer when they were asked alone. Pero when they heard when they're placed in a group and they were asked together and they heard others' estimates first, it's very amazing. Kailang judgments converge toward a group average. So katong 3 inches to at the top or 1 inch to the left and 10 inches to the right. Say for example, all of them answered like yeah. Example, one person said, "Well, I see the light moving 1 inch to the left," and then the other said, yeah, I guess around 0.5 inch, half an inch to the left," and the other person says, "Well, yeah, I saw the light move at 1.5 inch to the left too," something like that. So when we converge to a group average ilahang answers. And even more striking is when they were tested alone, even after a year, they still use the numbers that they reported. And the study is really about how group norms are formed and how are they carried through years and years. So it shows na social reality can emerge from ambiguous situations and become deeply internalized, even when it's just an illusion. So we're done now with the autokinetic studies. Now let's move to the Asch line studies, the power of obvious majorities. So for the next slide, let me show a video on a modern replication of the Asch line studies.
Today, we are going to be demonstrating a very famous psychological experiment known as the Asch experiment. This experiment tests conformity and whether or not a person will say something incorrect simply because everyone else is. What matters more, being right or fitting in? We have 5 professional actors that have been instructed to do as we say. Often they will be lying about what they think the answer is. But in position number 5, a real participant who has no idea what's going on will be seated. Now, their task is to match the length of the line on the left with one of the lines on the right. But what if everyone else in the room gave the wrong answer? Would you be bold enough to stick out and say what you saw? Or would you just fit in because it's easier or less uncomfortable? Let's find out.
So welcome everyone. My name's Ron. Your task is to choose the line on the right that matches the line on the left. I'll just call on you individually, in order 1 through 6.
The calm before the storm.
Okay, so let's begin.
The first few times, we're going to have the actors say the correct answer to gain the trust of our subject. The correct answer here is 3.
3.
3.
Number 3.
Number 3. 3.
1.
1.
Number 1. Number 1. Number 1.
Now they're all going to start lying.
The correct answer is 3. Let's see what our subject does.
1. 1.
Pretty quickly, she appears to be confused.
1.
Okay, number 1. Number 1. 3.
1. You can see participant 5 closing one eye, then the other, trying to figure out why everyone's wrong, but she's not going along with them.
Again, the correct answer is 3. Let's see what our subject does.
Number 1.
Number 1.
Yeah, number 1. Number 1. 3.
She's sticking to her guns, but she appears to be uncomfortable opposing the group. This time, the correct answer is 2.
3.
3.
Number 3. Number 3. Number 3.
Wow.
3. She's falling in line. Will she do it again? The correct answer is 3.
1.
1.
Number 1. Number 1. Number 1.
Conform.
Conformity, the desire to fit in, peer pressure. These are powerful social forces that shape our actions and beliefs and influence how we behave as individuals and as a society.
Solomon Asch took conformity research in a different direction with one of psychology's most famous experiments. Imagine sitting with six other people looking at lines that are clearly different lengths. Diba? There is an obvious answer kung asa ang correct answer. Ang line na parehas sa or same size sa A line sa choices. But then as you can see sa video, everyone answered the wrong answer. Pero ikaw, you're clear. You're clear na that's the wrong answer. Di na mao ang correct answer. And one by one, as they answered the wrong answer, eventually naabot sa imo ang kung ano, it's now your turn to say the answer. So what do you do? So remarkably, dakan kayo no in Asch participants, 75% actually conform at least once. And overall, people gave wrong answers 37% of the time. Remember, this was for something as simple as line length, and the answer is obvious. So when you're alone and you're asked a question, you're 99% accurate. So what, miss? What the percentage doesn't mean the percentages don't mean anything. Well, they do actually. And statistically, yeah, the percentages are significant to a degree. Imagine this, you give the correct answer 99% of the time when you're alone. Pero you intentionally give the wrong answer 37% of the time when you are in a group and just because others says so. That's scary, right? So if you're there and you give the wrong answer because everybody did, you're not stupid. And just like the girl in the video, she's not stupid. Often the participants knew the answers were wrong, pero they just felt compelled to conform to the group answer. So now let's move to perhaps psychology's most controversial and influential study. Kaya na siya ay ethical violations. At that time, wala pa may ethics committee. So kani si Stanley Milgram, he told participants they were helping with a learning experiment where they'd give electric shocks for wrong answers. And I'm not going to really dive deep into this because this study's been raised 2-3 times in the previous chapters. So we'll just like do a review of this study. Shocks, they range from 15 volts up to 450 volts. And ang 450 volts, it's marked as it's dangerous because it causes severe shock. And as the learner screamed and eventually went silent, the participants looked to the experimenter, who calmly said things like, "Please continue," or "You have no choice, please continue." Ang shocking result of the study is that 65% of ordinary people delivered what they believe were potentially lethal shocks. And these weren't evil people. They were neighbors, teachers, office workers who got caught up in a situation that gradually escalated beyond their moral comfort zone. So these studies in conformity and obedience makes us ask questions like, why do we conform? When or who are most likely to conform? So when are we most likely to conform? Research shows na there are several key factors. There is group size, there is unanimity, group cohesion, status, public versus private, or there's prior commitment. For group size, only up to 3 to 5 people ang optimal. Beyond that, adding more people doesn't increase pressure much. Ang unanimity is also crucial, kay if even one person disagrees or shares their dissenting views with the majority, conformity drops dramatically. And we conform more to people we see as similar to us or of higher status. Also sa public and private versus private, ang public responses create more pressure than the private ones. Kaya it's easier to resist when nobody's watching. And once we make a public commitment, this last factor here is that we tend to stick with it. Perhaps most importantly, even one dissenter can liberate others to express their true views by showing that disagreement is possible. So why do we conform? So researchers have identified two main psychological mechanisms. There's normative influence and there's also informational influence. What's any normative influence? It's about fitting in. We conform because we want to be liked and avoid rejection. So think about laughing at jokes you don't find funny or wearing certain clothes to fit in. Diba? We do that because we want to belong to the group. We want to be liked. We want to be one of them. Now, another kanang possible reasons why we conform is informational influence. It's about being right. We conform because we think others know something we don't. Especially katong remember the girl in the line study, diba? Na she said na maybe there's something that I wasn't able to see that the others can see. So there is information influence there. She wanted to be right, so she conformed to the group, even though inherently she knew deep inside na what the group says is the wrong answer. But because we think man na, maybe they see something I'm not seeing, that's informational influence at play. So if you're lost and see everyone walking in one direction, you might follow because you assume na they know where they're going. And both types can operate at the same time, and understanding asa didto is driving your behavior can help you make more conscious choices. Remember, don't blindly follow something, okay? Be aware of your actions. Why are you doing this? Ask the big question, why are you doing this? Okay? And yes, individual differences, situational factors do come into play, right? The normative and the informational influence. There is a factor. And situations, as we discussed in the previous chapters, they can be very powerful. Pero there is an individual factor. Some people do conform more than others. Na ay personality factors that are at play here. Pero personality factors have limited predictive power. Ano sa meaning ani limited predictive power? Oftentimes, ang situational forces usually matters more than individual traits when we're talking about conformity. Pero there is a very big difference sa cultural background. Like people from collectivistic cultures that value harmony tend to conform more than those from individualistic cultures that prize independence. And neither approach is inherently better. Right? They reflect different values about the relationship between individuals and groups. And social roles and status matter too. Ang people in lower status positions tend to conform more, and our role expectations strongly influence our behavior. Eventually, people can engage in systemic harmful behavior that they never would have thought possible. So we're now talking about when conformity becomes dangerous. We've seen this in historical atrocities like the Holocaust, the My massacre, the Abu Ghraib prison abuse. If you're curious about this and you don't know it, I highly recommend that you do a deep dive into these things here. Kay you'll be open to a bunch of atrocities that happen because of group influence. Igana siya ka terrifying. And what's more that is again I would like to repeat it. The people that did this, they're not inherently evil. They're just ordinary people na became complicit in terrible acts through small steps. So, yun hinahinay ba? At first, bearable pa siya until such time na makaunaw na ba? Remember the technique, the foot and the door technique? It applies here. Small steps, gradual steps until magkadagko, na ay dissonance, and then you internalize the belief that what you're doing is correct, what you're doing is right. You're doing this for a greater good. Ang dark side sa conformity reveals itself through gradual escalation. Again, it begins with small acts of compliance, followed by incremental increases in demands, and then by self justification and rationalization. In understanding this process, it does not excuse the behavior, pero it helps us recognize and prevent such situations. And it's important you remember this one that there are warning signs when conformity becomes is already dangerous, huh? So look at it very closely. I want you to memorize this, apply it, and observe your surroundings. What are the warning signs? First is that when authority figures demands unquestioning obedience, when they say, because I says so, they didn't give you any valid reason, any rationalization or justification behind the orders. Is it for the common good? What happens if I do this? What will happen to the common good? Because this and so? Okay, are there alternative options to do this? Something like that. And when an authority figure says, you do this because it says so, I'm the authority, that's a warning sign. Okay? And then another thing is gradual erosion of moral boundaries. When you find yourself already at a dissonant, example, people in the My massacre, soldiers there, they were thinking, maybe some of them, they were thinking, okay, this is not good already. Pero it's an order. And now they've internalized it. That they're just doing it for the common good. They're eradicating what could be a threat to the country or something like that. That is already an erosion of moral boundaries. When you label victims of war as collateral damage, that is already a sign of gradual erosion of moral boundaries. Okay? You tend to dehumanize your victims because you want to morally disengage. And another thing is isolation from dissenting voices. And it's very important, this one, especially I want to relate this to something that's more relatable in you, is your social media. Okay, if you think and you scroll, try scrolling your social media now. And if you're just fed one message after another, the same message all throughout, you're already isolated from a dissenting voice. Okay? So what you think is true could just be a percentage or portion of reality that you're exposed with. It's not the whole truth. So remember, always consider the opposite. Okay, remember that, okay, class, because it's very powerful. Ang belief perseverance na to. So I want you to think what could be the historical moments in the Philippines where this happened. One thing that I could think of, and I want you to think for yourself, okay, but this is my example. Example, the Marcos regime introduced violence in some parts of the country. And, I know some of you will disagree because you're fed with different information with your nanays, tatais, and your social media, right? But this is based on my research too. Okay, so there are gradually an erase of what happened, a gradual historical revisions that happened. But these happened. There are reports of abuse of authority during the period. Okay, so that's one thing that an example that I could think of close to the Philippines. Anyway, let's move on to the good side of conformity. Now, conformity is not inherently bad. It serves important functions like social coordination. Okay, through conformity, it enables cooperation, organization, and safety sa public. Following emergency procedures, adhering to professional standards, and conforming to positive moral values, they all benefit society, and even resistance often requires conformity. These social movements need coordination. Whistleblowing requires social support, and heroes typically conform to positive values and supportive groups. Remember ka, one dissenter can liberate others to resist harmful conformity. When people see that dissent is possible, they're more likely to express their true views and act on their values. Karon, we will talk about resistance and reactance. Humans aren't passive conformity machines. We're not bugo that are slaves to social influences, right? We actively resist when our freedom feels threatened. And that's called the reactance. And psychological reactance theory explains why pressure can sometimes backfire, producing the opposite of what's intended. So I want you to think about the forbidden fruit effect. Kaning example ani, mga underage drinking patterns or fashion backlashes. So people also want to feel unique, pero not completely deviant. And this is very salient in individualistic cultures, and some Filipinos really probably with individualistic self-controls. Okay, so they notice with these groups of people, notice what makes us different in a group where we stand out. So if you're in a room full of people with different race, then you example you go to China, and you suddenly feel like you suddenly notice you're being Filipino, right? Because it's just the difference is stark. So our difference is highlighted where we stand out, or when we're the different one. And sometimes we rebel to assert our individuality. So in fashion, if we see that everyone else is wearing the same black shirt and jeans, we then want to wear a different style of clothing. We want to assert our expression, our unique expression of ourselves. So sa digital age, how do we apply concepts of social influence? Social influence has evolved in the digital age. Okay? Social media creates new forms of conformity pressure through likes, shares, and viral behaviors. And online reviews influence our decisions through informational conformity. Kita ba ng Google reviews or restaurants? That's one, no? That's informational conformity because we don't want to spend our money and time there if the restaurant sucks or the food sucks, right? And political polarization gets amplified through echo chambers and groupthink. Remember the one I tell you na the algorithm feeds you what you want to hear and see? That's creating an echo chamber. You think and you believe that what you're thinking and what you're saying and what you're standing up for is the correct thing. You're fed with it every day. You're fed with posts that agrees with you. Okay, that's creating political polarization. And these platforms can create powerful conformity pressures, sometimes even stronger than face-to-face influence, because they seem more anonymous while actually being more public. So I want to relate this to the Philippines' very maybe timely issue that we're still experiencing right now. Like Duterte's going to ICC has polarized opinions. Some say na it's unright for another country not to hold him liable or something. Like it's a betrayal of the Filipino people. And there are other groups of people that he should be who thinks that he should be held accountable because his regime has allowed for such cruelty, human cruelty to happen. Okay, so there are polarized opinions there. And social media created that. Now, I'm expecting you to be a wiser consumer of information in the digital age, especially since there is a proliferation of fake news and sensationalized media online. You cannot determine whether a video is fake or not nowadays. And it's a really scary time for all of us. So be wise, everyone. Now, this should be a skill that you've already developed and is still developing up until now. And it should be highlighted in your course na readings in Philippine history. Now let's go over the ethical considerations of some of the conformity and obedience studies we discussed a while ago. The classic conformity studies taught us as much about research ethics as they did about human behavior. So kang Milgram's participants, they experienced severe psychological distress, which led to major changes in how we conduct research. There is already modern ethical standards that require institutional review boards, careful risk benefit analysis, and special protections for vulnerable populations. So when you're conducting research, there is what we call an ethics review committee or review ethics committee, REC. And this creates challenges. Okay, we can't easily replicate these landmark studies, and we might be missing important insights. But we've developed, as we improve, we've developed alternative methods like simulations and field observations that can provide valuable knowledge while protecting participants' well-being. So let's bring together the key insights. Social influence is universal but varies in strength and form depending on the situation and individuals involved. Situational factors often override personality differences. Anyone can be influenced under the right circumstances. Multiple mechanisms drive conformity from wanting to fit in to wanting to be right. And most importantly, awareness enables choice. Understanding these processes helps us respond more thoughtfully rather than automatically. And lastly, the goal isn't to eliminate conformity entirely, which would be impossible and harmful to society in some way or another, but to conform consciously to values we've critically evaluated. So, what are the critical evaluation skills that we need to learn? We need to question authority. When is obedience appropriate versus dangerous? I have a freshman class that they have a mindset, no na, kanang dili lang ta mo question kay siya magud ang nay authority, no, that's not really a good mindset to develop, really. And I was so disheartened when I heard that. Why is our generation, our new generation, our young generation thinking like that? And meaning to say wala nag critically use kuan, nag critically think, no, nag or uh not thinking critically. If you're doing that, you're blindly following just because a person is an authority figure. So practice this one, critical evaluation skills. Question: when is obedience appropriate versus dangerous? And seek diverse perspectives. Avoid echo chambers and groupthink. Recognize your biases. When are you most susceptible to influence? And support to others. Okay, enable dissent and independent thinking. And we also have our future directions that are cross-cultural research, where we understand influence across societies, and our neuroscience integration, like brain mechanisms of social influence, and applications to the digital age, like online behavior and virtual conformity. So let me end this video lecture with this final thought. The most fundamental lesson is that ordinary people, simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility, can become agents in a terrible, destructive process. But also, ordinary people with awareness and social support can choose to act with moral courage and independent judgment. We've learned that we're more influenced by social forces than we typically realize. But awareness creates choice. Understanding influence helps us respond thoughtfully rather than automatically. As Milgram noted, ordinary people, simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility, can become agents in a terrible destructive process. But the flip side is equally true. Ordinary people with awareness and social support can choose to act with with moral courage and independent judgment. Your challenge as informed individuals is to use this knowledge to promote both healthy social coordination and critical thinking in your personal and professional lives. That's it, class. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you got out as much of it as you can. I hope it does not stay abstract concepts. I hope you apply it in real life. I hope you bring it to heart. Ask the three-letter word, why. Thank you again, and as always, have fun learning.